On today's show, joined by special guest Jake Kemp to break down the Dallas Mavericks versus Utah Jazz series. Mavs, are they moving on? Are we all getting ahead of ourselves? What's going on with Jalen Brunson and the Dallas Mavericks? We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can subscribe to the show, see our smiling, beautiful faces, and you can comment below. Comment anything. Comment below. Joining me, as always, my co-host contributor at Mavs.com. The guest guru with One More Thing King. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
Oh, I'm excited today. We have Jake. He's back.
What
Jake,
up?
If Nick and I were, if we were Jerry and Steven, and I'm trying to think who makes the best decisions of who made the decision for Taco and who made the decision for Micah Parsons.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say you're both Will McClay.
Ooh, okay, making good choices.
Yeah, but like, you don't need the credit, you know?
Yeah,
Just
don't need the
sit behind
credit.
the scenes. Dude, that intro gets me so hyped. Like hearing that live and being on, I'm like, this is like, I feel like I'm on CNN. Like I'm hearing the NBC Meet the Press theme, and I'm like, I watch this every week, and now I get to hear it sitting here.
It's like, hey, here I am live on the field, and we are going to be talking about the Dallas Mavericks.
The first time we had a big win and Nick let the music play and he just like casually is like, let it ride. And I was like, all right. The first time I was like, that's kind of corny probably. And now like people will like tweet at us, DM us, everything. Let it ride. Tell us at the game.
Oh, I love
last night at the game told it, like, you better let the music ride tomorrow. I was like, oh my gosh. God. People in person are telling me this now. But it's because right now, I mean, like,
great vibes, man. It's great vibes. Like
the vibes are great.
Vibes. Yeah, great vibes. No, sensational vibes, and like the vibes are immaculate.
I still can't get over that drop. Not edited. The vibes are immaculate. The Mavs are up 3-2 in the series. Jake, what has surprised you the most about this Mavericks team in the series that they're in right now, especially not having Luka for the first 3 games?
I mean, I think the thing that would have to be the most surprising is mainly just Jalen stepping up on the playoff stage. You know, there's really none of this is that surprising. I mean, they were a solid to very good defensive team during the year. Took a little bit of a step back after the KP trade, but I think we all thought they had this sort of defensive effort in them. Maybe not to this degree against the Utah team that was #1, you know, in offensive rating during the year. But I don't know how you can look at the fact that a dude played 11 minutes in a deciding Game 7 1 year ago and is now, you know, was keeping them in it in Game 1, was able to help them win Game 2, and is now probably been one of the 6 or 7 best players in the NBA postseason. So even if we all believed that he could do it, I don't know how you wouldn't say that's a bit surprising. And probably, you know, at some point there's probably a conversation to be had about like going back and watching last year's Clippers series and being like, did it really have to be that way? Like, I know Nick Batum's out there and they're saying that he's getting bullied around and Bob's firing off on Twitter, but I don't know. He's better than he was last year, but is he like this much better? And is the matchup that much different to where he was playing 10, 12 minutes a game against the Clippers, and now he's out there for 32 minutes a game, putting up 20 plus with like a 4-1 turnover or assisted turnover ratio? Like, it's crazy how far we've come in 363 days.
It's the Kristaps Porzingis case. He's like, hey, I'm not this bad, right? Like in the playoffs last year, it's like, I'm not this bad. I'm just being used wrong. And so I wonder if that I listened to Locked On Jazz, like I know many of you did listening right now, because I saw all of you in the comment section commenting "Go Mavs." But he was going through the list of all the small guards. He was going through like Mike Conley and Mitchell that are struggling in the mid-range, struggling to get their shots off. And he's like, yeah, all these guys are struggling. Look at Morant. Look at all these guys, except for Brunson. It's like every single number he went through was except Brunson. Isaac, do we think that this is Brunson just taking this huge leap forward, or did he have he have this in him even last year, just being used in a different way?
I think it could be a combination of both. I think he did take a step forward, but I think there is something. You look at his shot attempts last year. In 7 games, he had 44 shot attempts, and now through 5 games, he's had 109, which is just like wild to like think about that way. You know, like Jake said, he averaged 8 points in the series last year. He's averaging 28 in this series, 16 minutes a game last year in that Clippers series, 38 minutes in this series. It's just a whole different role for him. But I do think he's gotten better. And I'm kind of thinking, like, was there something in those first 3 games without Luka that he's like looking at it saying, hey, I did this on the biggest stage without Luka, that now we're going to talk about this McMahon article, with Pops there giving some fiery quotes. But I just wonder, we hear everything that he wants to be in Dallas, but did those first 3 games do anything for Brunson's thinking of, oh, maybe I'm even better than what I thought?
It's so hard to separate the dad from Brunson in that piece, right? Like, they're just so incredibly different. You talked to Brunson after game 5, and I said yesterday, it's like you couldn't even tell that they had won the game. And then you talked to Rick Brunson in that piece, and he's like, oh yeah, no discount. It's almost like he has like different voices on his shoulder. Rick Brunson's like, oh yeah, we're taking no discount. He took the Chandler Parsons approach to it. In this, it seems like what Rick Brunson is doing, but
without screaming at Cuban from a $200,000 car.
Do we know that Rick Brunson hasn't done that yet?
That's actually a good point. I think the biggest thing, before we get to the McMahon piece, and we can transition whenever you guys want, is just, to me, this played out perfectly where, there's no better way for you to fully exercise last year's playoff demons if you're Jalen Brunson than doing it without Luka. Like, that can only help. His price was already not going to be yesterday's price, right? Like, we saw where this was headed. We know what happens in free agency, especially if, you're, his age and you've gotten better every year. So to me, I don't look at that as a negative at all, or like that he's looking at that sideways. I think he looks at it and they look at it and say, we got the highest usage player in the NBA, the guy who averages the 2nd most drives in the NBA, and Luka. He's going to miss some time every now and then. He's not going to be 100% all the time. Now we know that this guy can do it on the biggest stage, which would have been huge even if he was a factor last playoffs. But he was a zero. He was a net negative, basically, and then it happened through 2.5 games in this series. So, man, I don't know. It's huge, huge, huge.
It's wild when you look at that Villanova team and you look at all the players that went above him in that draft that, obviously Mikal Bridges went over him. Dante went over him. I think Amari Spellman, if I don't even think he's in the league anymore, went over him. I think that was it. And then, he goes in the first to second round there. And now he's probably going to make more than what Mikal is making in Phoenix. That it's just ironic because he had the best resume out of all of them. Then the draft happens and he goes later than all of them, and now he's probably going to be making more money than all of them. And I freaking love Mikal Bridges, so we might be seeing more of Mikal Bridges coming up soon.
Yeah, Spellman won the 30th pick in that draft.
Wow.
Okay, a little bit ahead.
Just a little bit, just right there. Do we think that it is anything about matchup? Because we've only seen, we kept waiting for Brunson in the playoffs, and now we've only seen him against one matchup, this Utah Jazz team that has not, had the best perimeter defense, and the Mavs have been able to figure them out. It's definitely different than a Clippers team. We kept talking about how, we've only seen this Mavs team play against the Clippers. Now, is it only against the Utah Jazz? Jake, how much has matchup do you think played into the hand of Jalen Brunson, especially in this first 3 games or so?
I think it is a pretty big deal, and I do think it's obviously the ultimate contrast from the Clippers series. But I also think as a player gets better, and they're playing with Luka, I would be interested to see how many of his Clippers minutes are actually with Luka. If he's going to be playing the bulk of his minutes with Luka, and heck, even for that matter with Dinwiddie, then his role is different than it was last time around. Whenever he was played off the floor in a matchup dependent role. If you can be the weak side creator, or you can only have to be the primary playmaker 30% of the time as opposed to 80% of the time whenever you're on the floor, which is pretty much what they were asking him to do against the Clippers, I think that's different, and he's crafty enough being a 3-level scorer that certain teams might give him trouble, Phoenix possibly being one of them with their wing depth, the aforementioned Mikal Bridges. But man, I don't know. I just think the dude is a gamer. I think if he's playing a lot of his minutes with another creator, I don't worry too much. I don't see any scenario that anybody is able to do anything close to him as to what the Clippers did last time around. I think that ship has sailed. right? Like he may struggle against some teams more than others and maybe more, profitable against Utah than others, but I just think he's on a different level right now. And a huge part of that is the matchup is almost nullified by who he's on the floor with.
And I think playing with Kristaps Porzingis probably held him back a little bit too. Like it held back a lot of the offense the last couple of years because they had to play through him and had to figure out how to work with him. And Luka even struggled with that. And Luka can play with anybody, right? Like Luka can make anybody look good. And at times he struggled to make KP look good.
I looked up the minutes last year real quick. They played 59 minutes together in the Clippers series.
Wow.
And I mean, and so I don't have the minutes together in front of me right now. I just looked up the Clippers one, but that's not a ton for a 7-game series of being on the floor together. Just to further prove Jake's point there.
Coming up, more with Jake Kemp on the Jalen Brunson contract. Will the Mavericks actually pony up the money? What does Rick Brunson's comments mean? All that and more. But before we do, let me tell you about Shady Rays.
Where's my glasses?
Shady Rays. Isaac, I gave you your glasses. You got them. I don't know where yours are. But Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. And something you won't find anywhere else. Like Isaac can't find his. Isaac, if you have lost your Shady Rays, they have protection on every pair. Lost or broken protection. They will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happens. So go check out shadyrays.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. 50% off. 50% off. Code LOCKEDON at shadyrays.com. Let's take a look at that ESPN piece from Tim McMahon. So that came out. Interesting timing for it to come out, right? With him having an incredible series right now. They get lots of quotes from Rick Brunson, who is Brunson's dad, played in the NBA, who was the announcer on game 1 or game 2, kept calling him Rick Brunson. Was it Spencer Haywood? One of the announcers on NBA TV kept calling Brunson Rick Brunson the whole game. He is his dad. What do we think about how it came out, how the Mavs have handled this whole situation? What do you believe from it? Isaac, what are your thoughts on the way the Mavs have handled Brunson's whole contract situation?
I thought the McMahon part of the timing of the extension part, you talk to different people and there's a couple different stories here and there of like, okay, when they offered the extension, who turned down what, and all of that. I thought the timing part of his reporting was so interesting, of not just that they didn't offer it before the season, but McMahon, correct me if I'm wrong, said that in his piece that they didn't even offer it. They didn't even have it on the table in January. And that's kind of wild to me.
Yeah, I guess my thought on it was just I thought it was a bit muddy, and I don't think this is Tim's fault. I think it was that the source that it's not like an unnamed source. It's Rick.
Yeah,
kind of had some, I don't know, like questionable. His timeline is a little bit fishy to me. I do think there's a chance that if it wasn't on the table in January, I do buy that was because the Mavericks actually thought that we have a better chance at trading him if he hasn't already signed this extension. And I could honestly see that being taken as a slight by Jalen or by his dad. So I can see that. But I mean, at the end of the day, though, like that's just business, right? I mean, they're doing that because that you're an expiring player who's improving every year and you're super cheap, right? Like they're not going to let you go for nothing. That's just part of the business. But I don't know. I would have preferred that if Tim called Rick, that if Rick would have just said, now's not the time. and I really don't think it affects Jalen at all. It's just interesting to me whenever the public voices of one camp are so far apart. And by the way, that's not his agent. Like he still has CAA in the mix.
Right.
So the whole thing is just interesting to me and ultimately probably immaterial. He's going to get paid a ton of money because he's balling out on the biggest stage and was already getting better. Whether Rick Brunson felt the need to reinforce that or not, it's just it's just weird. The timing was just strange.
It's strange when we hear from dads like this at all, right? Like you hear from Marvin Bagley's dad. Like you're like, how much should we take from that? You hear from obviously LeVar Ball had a whole situation with Lonzo at the beginning, and he's sort of tailed off here. But you start hearing from some of these guys, and you wonder how much agency is there. And then some fans say, well, we got to believe the dad because he's right there. He's more into it than anybody. Well, how much agency does Brunson actually have? What does he feel about this? And Brunson's only real quote in this is I don't want to talk about it right now during this. I want to be focused on what's in front of me. I want to be focused on the playoffs, and we'll talk about it after the season. And so it's hard for me to take any of this and say, oh, well, Brunson's gone. He's out of here. He's gone out of this. He's had the, Gordon Hayward, I've been disrespected, and so now I'm going to go sign somewhere else because I didn't get the contract offer, that was given to me. I still, even through reading this, my take on it at the beginning was the Mavs, through some kind of back channel, said that, hey, this is what we can offer you, either through the agency or whatever. And they were like, we're not going to take that. The money, like the number that Dorian Finney-Smith got in that extension, that's the one that they could offer him. They're like, no, we're not going to take that. And so they never made an official offer and put it together and put it on the table.
Right.
That to me has always been the way that I thought about this. Now, if they offered it a little bit later in the year, I don't know why they would have done that and done an offer, but it still hasn't been officially offered. So that's what I think with it. I still think that they'll pony up the money. Are we worried? And the only way that this goes bad is when I went on Locked On Knicks, and they've just been sharks circling the water on this, just waiting for the situation to go bad. I think the only way that Brunson does leave is if Cuban gets cute with the contract, or if they get, hey, we're going to try to skimp here. And we mentioned Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones at the beginning of this. If they try to pull some of the things that the Cowboys have been doing with some of these contracts, where they're like, hey, we're not going to give you the top dollar. We'll try to, cut corners here and there. And it, rubs the player the wrong way.
I just don't think the money part's going to be an issue, because they can't replace him if they let him walk. So right. I think the only thing that I'm worried about, or I don't even say worried, because I think they're going to bring him back a pretty high number. But I think the only thing you got to worry about is just him like souring on the relationship somehow, and that's the only thing. But everything, anytime you talk to anybody, it's like, hey, he likes being here. And especially if you have a guy who handles the ball that likes playing with Luka Doncic, then you don't want to get cute with that either, because that you don't find those guys around the league that often. Other point guards that want to play with Luka Doncic, in the sense of a guy who's going to have the ball so much in his hands. And so if he has good chemistry with him, he's playing dang good basketball, and he's young, you don't want to play around with that. I don't think they do. I think whatever money is out there, whatever contract is out there on the table from any team, Detroit, New York, whoever it is, Dallas is just going to pay the money.
Yeah, and then from there they'll have to try to get creative with some of these other contracts they have. Obviously, we all know who the 2 or 3 that possibly could be, on the move if that were to come up. But yeah, I don't think they'll get cute with it. And I personally kind of find it funny when people say, "Well, what if he wants his own team?" I'm like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean anymore? Like most teams have 2 guards, like have 2. The whole, like, the notion of like the early 2000s or even prior, like it's the point guards team. There's one guy, like that just doesn't even really exist anymore. Like most teams have a couple different, guards that are going back and forth as far as, being, obviously it's Luka's team if we want to say that, but I just don't see any scenario where if I'm Jalen Brunson, I could squint and say, I can find a better situation than this.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Or if we even take a step back, like, yes, he's been great this year. He's been really good for the Mavs. He's had a really good first couple of games against the Jazz. Is he as good as a leading guard on another team? Like, I'm not saying that he's ever going to – I don't know if he's ever going to get to, like, even fringe all-star level. Do we see him taking another step forward and getting to that point?
He could. I mean, I was hanging out with David Locke at halftime the other night, and – he was talking to somebody in the Jazz front office about, just comps between Brunson and Kyle Lowry.
Hold on. Was it Dwayne Wade?
No, would not reference this story if it was Wade.
Thank you.
But he was, throwing out to Kyle Lowry. And that's where, that name was thrown out before when we were talking about Brunson's timeline, like months ago or years ago, and a couple years ago. It's like, no. And I didn't see it. I'll eat my words on that. I was like, man, 6-man, a good 6-man, maybe, quality starter type of thing. I didn't think Brunson was going to put up 40 in a playoff game. So I don't know. I just know what I'm confident in is no matter what the number goes to, Dallas is going to pay it. It's because you just can't just take his name off of it. You can't let the asset go. So if it goes up to 25, Dallas say, okay, like we'll go up to 25. And that's Detroit's only play to it, right? Like you want to go to Detroit for 25 a year. Okay. Well, Dallas would do that probably. So, maybe there's a need. And the thing with the Knicks is they don't have salary cap, so they got to have Dallas play ball with them. And I think McMahon says in that story that sources say Dallas wouldn't entertain a sign and trade for him.
Gavin was like on Locked On Knicks was like, so which of the pieces on the Knicks would interest you if it got to a sign and trade situation? And I was like, Quickly and Mitchell, maybe. I was like, there's really nothing on the roster. Like, I don't know. They wouldn't do it straight up for Randall. That's sort of been a disaster for them this year. There's nothing on that roster.
We would not get close to that. No.
I mean, even RJ Barrett, like, would that be something you guys would look at?
RJ's good. I like RJ.
But outside of that, why would the Knicks do that at that point?
And I don't mean to be like old school guy here, like, because I'm definitely not. But All-Star, like, being a shorthand, I mean, he's just a winning player. And I don't mean like, he won a bunch of games in college. I just mean like he contributes to winning in a very tangible, impactful way that doesn't always show up in a way that makes somebody an all-star. And so, like, I don't really care that much if he ends up with like an actual all-star distinction, because I do think he contributes to winning at the level that if that's what the all-star team was, he would be a fringe guy. But it's not, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. I mean, other than to like the fact that sometimes guys get paid on that. But I, you know what I mean? Like, I just think he's a guy who contributes to winning, and he contributes to winning in the way that Isaac said that is hard to find. I mean, think of all the Kemba Walker debates we had. And just on down the line of like guards that we were like, man, I don't know, like, would they be on board with that with Luka? Like, he's going to be so ball dominant. Well, you already have one. So just get it done.
Look, it's a guy like Marcus Smart. Like, I know he's better defensively than Brunson, but he's never made an all-star team. But look how much he's contributing to this, Boston team right now that's on fire.
For sure.
I mean, he was just defensive player of the year. I don't know if that matters at all.
Well,
but you look to Jake's point. You look at the scoring in the first, like through 3 games. These were the 2 leading scorers in the NBA, I think, in the playoffs. And I thought Brunson's buckets were way more important and impactful than Mitchell's buckets. Right? All of us worship Dirk Nowitzki. He didn't average more points than everybody in the NBA, but it felt like his buckets were more impactful, came at better times. He was a winning player than, guys like, I don't know. Who should I throw shade at this point? Tracy McGrady, right? That was throwing up a ton of buckets for like those Magic teams, and you're like, I don't know if those buckets mean as much as what Dirk's doing.
I mean, you could just say Donovan Mitchell for now, right?
Well, yeah, so I was saying Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, keep it to those two, and just look at how their points are coming. And yeah, I mean, I hope we don't spend a ton of time with Rick Brunson topics over the next couple months. I'll just put it to you that way. I hope they just get it done and they move on.
I think this will be. I honestly do think it will be a quick one. It will be a, early morning, or I forgot what the time is now. Is it 6 o'clock or?
Say it's like afternoon now.
Yeah, I think it'll be a quick one, and I think it'll be, I do think the playoffs have raised the price on him, and I would not be shocked if it was a 4 for 100 or a little over 100 or something like that, and we're all like, oh, okay, well, we talked about it, and here we go. Brunson's back.
Coming up, is it crazy to think that this Mavericks team could really go on a run? We'll talk about that with Jake Kemp and more. But before we do that, let me tell you about Built Bar. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're delicious. They're awesome. And have you tried the puffs yet? If you've tried Built Bar already and you haven't tried the puffs, you're missing out. They're absolutely delicious. I ordered my last box that I ordered for myself, and I spend my own money on these. I absolutely do. My last box that I ordered was Churro Puff and the Brownie Batter Puff. If the Brownie Batter Puff comes back, it's over. It's over. You got to order that as soon as it comes out because they're already sold out right now. And they just introduced new flavors, Isaac.
Ooh, really?
White chocolate berry granola. Chocolate peanut butter granola. Chocolate coconut granola. These new granola bars, if you want to go check them out at Built Bar, the chocolate coconut has 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar. 4 grams of sugar in a bar that I guarantee will taste delicious. All of them do. Check them out. Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your entire order. It's Built.com. Jake, are you worried at all about Cuban paying the tax? Especially for this team.
No.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe.
Well, so like the thing is that, whenever like the 2011 situation first happened, I can't even remember the name of the website that used to do this, but I went back and looked, and I mean, they were second to only the Knicks for like a 12-year period, basically since there was a tax. They paid the second most amount of luxury tax for basically all of the 2000s, up until the time when they decided not to because they thought they had an aging roster. if the impetus between not paying the tax before was because they thought they had an aging roster that would lock them into that roster, that's not the same as thinking that you have a young roster that you're locked into. Those are two different things, because young players can still be traded a lot easier than older players can be traded who are locked in. So if you feel like, oh, maybe we're boxed in because Dorian's on a number, Luka's on a number, Jalen's on a number, and then you get to some of those other deals and you can be a little bit, fungible there and possibly get creative with those deals. I think if there is a scenario where the reason for not going up $2 to $3 million a year on what is your second best player right now is the tax, there will be a riot.
Yes. In Victory Park.
Yeah.
On the level of the Tyson Chandler not coming back thing, or worse or better?
I mean, that one to me, obviously the championship made that very emotional. I actually think that was more defensible, which we don't have to get into right now. Just from the standpoint,
off-season thing we can do.
At least there was a lockout that they could point to and say, we don't know what the financial situation is. This is cut and dry. Like you're not in the repeater. It'll be your first year. You just pay it and you figure it out from there, because you've already figured out the hardest part, which is getting a superstar and locking him up. From there, figure it out.
Some other guys around this price point, like 21 to 24, Julius Randle, John Collins, Buddy Hield, Vooch, then Draymond, DeRozan, Kyle.
Oh, man, Brunson might get 30 million.
but those type, like Brunson.
Yeah.
Brunson making the same as Buddy Hield and Randall and John Collins and Brogdon. Like, I get that. Like,
for sure.
So anyway,
for sure.
What we'd all riot on is if, it's like first 601 or whatever it is, and it's Jalen Brunson, Detroit Pistons agreed to like a 4 for 80, and we're all like freaking out. And that's when the riots would happen.
That's when we'd all start driving around trying to find Brunson's number in Detroit, right?
Put a chair in front of the door.
Drive to his house. To his house. We were talking about Tyson Chandler earlier. He had a little tweet spree about the Mavs last night. He was tweeting about Luka. He was tweeting about the Mavs defensive clinic. Luka coming back off of that calf strain. It's just been awesome to watch. He was toying with the Jazz at times, and even David Locke in his Locked On Jazz, like, he was messing with us. Like, he was messing with the Jazz at times in Game 5. Luka is taking the Mavs to another level. And Jake, is it wild to think that this could be Luka's LeBron 2007 year, where he like took the Cavs to the finals in a year that nobody really expected? I think Nick Wright has been one of the guys that's been big on it, on at least the national stage. He's like, this is the year that Luka is just going to take this team to the finals, and before everyone even expects it.
Obviously, it's super wild to even allow your mind to go there when you haven't won a series in a decade. It's super, super wild, but I also think that the formula is there, right? They were pretty close to a top 10 team on both sides of the ball, and that's with the fact that they started, 16 or 17 and 18?
16, 18, yeah. 16
and 18, whenever. By the way, I enjoyed that from Grant Hill last night, where he's like, after the start of 2022 calendar year, that's when they bought in. That's when they knew that they were buying into. I'm like, do you remember Charlie Brown Jr.? There were a lot of guys playing.
I remember Brandon Knight and Isaiah Thomas on this team, right?
And it's like, I don't think they didn't buy in before that. I think they were without a significant number of heavy.
I remember that Reggie Bullock couldn't hit a 3 for the first 2.
There were some wild Mavs fans takes in December, by the way.
Oh yeah, that was a dark time for a lot of us. But they do have, like, for the better part of the year, all of the familiar, hallmarks of a team that can contend. They don't have a second superstar, which is typically that's what we've conditioned ourselves into thinking that you have to have. But they play team defense. They have a second creator. They have a third creator. They have a decent enough bench. They don't have any sort of internal discord. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Did Giannis even have a second superstar last year, though? Is Brunson on the same level as Middleton? Middleton has made an all-star team, but
Drew.
Yeah, see, this is what I've always said, is that, like, how good your 1 is affects how good your 2 needs to be, and how good your 2 is affects how good your 3 needs to be. And then that probably stops at like 4, because from there you're talking about you just want serviceable role players. But I do think that if your 1 is healthy and your 2 is proving to be better than you thought he could be as a 2, and you have a couple of other guys, and also the Bucks kind of were a refreshing breath of fresh air, I guess, in that regard, right? That was a cool championship for that reason. I mean, even the Raptors, which were kind of a weird, bizarro version of that by trading for a guy for 1 year,
right.
it still felt refreshing to see somebody do that.
Yeah.
And I do think that, like, if the Mavericks find themselves like in the conference finals, I think it's going to be cool because I do think that the average NBA fan will rally around them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was on we were on Twitch the other day with Bobby and them and Bobby and Kat, and we were talking about just the city here locally with Dallas, and just like this playoff run, let's say they keep on going, and I'm gonna throw out the cringy word here, the casuals will start to like fall in love with the role players. And I think we could see like this playoff run could lead to more Mavs fans viewing Dorian Finney-Smith like some of these 2011 role players that will live in infamy, forever. Like we always think about, some of these role players and the custodian and Deshaun Stevenson and all these guys. And it's like, I still think there's a good portion of Mavs fans that haven't fully fallen in love with Dorian and Jalen Brunson and Reggie Bullock's
For
newer,
sure, Reggie.
Yeah. So I'm excited for those guys.
Is there a portion of us that's getting ahead of ourselves? Well, obviously getting ahead of ourselves talking about finals, but getting ahead of ourselves with the Jazz. Is there anything that we see in this series that, Isaac and I, you and I have been thinking about, okay, well, why haven't they not gone small? Like, why have they not tried any kind of different pitch they could do? Are we getting ahead of ourselves at all? Or Jake, what were the signs that you could see that this series is like, it's done? The Mavs have this. Because it seemed like David Locke on his podcast today was resigned to that fact himself.
Yeah, and he's very close to the team, so I would take his word for it. Where my seats were last night, I had a really good shot of Daniel House trying to take a bolted down chair. I don't know if you guys saw that. It wasn't on TNT. It was only on Bally's, but he was trying to pull the bolted down chair up from the floor, and then when it wouldn't go, he started kicking it. And then he went down the tunnel, and that's twice in 3 games that he's had a situation. Donovan Mitchell's hurt. I know the MRI was negative, but we came into this thinking that this team is kind of falling apart qualitatively, and they've shown no signs of not doing that. The only flip side thing to that counterpoint would be, they still haven't had a game where they took their normal season amount of threes, right? Like they could have a game where they go like 19 for 40 from 3. Yeah. Like that definitely could happen because their shot quality score in the last game was pretty good for a team that scored that had 48 points midway through the third quarter. It actually was pretty good, but I also just have a really hard time with Luka being at this level, thinking that there's really anything they can do to beat the Mavs twice in a row. And I will be on pins and needles if it has to go to game 7, but it's just hard for me to imagine. It's really hard for me to imagine the way the Jazz are right now, them beating Dallas twice, in the next 5 days.
Yeah, I'm with Jake on it. As long as Luka stays healthy and he doesn't re-aggravate the leg, it's a wrap. It's over. And I think once they went up, by like 20 something there, and the game
was like 50-32 or something like that. We were like, oh, okay.
Once they hit that, then I just remember up in the press box, we're like, all right, if they lose this series at this point, then there's some problems. And I don't want to go down the whole dark road of what if they end up losing this series? Like what happens? Like what do you do? But I think it's at that point to where you need to take this series now and end it.
There we go. The Mavs. We hope they move on. They should be moving on. If they haven't, it's a collapse. But this team has something special, and we're excited to see it. Jake, thanks so much for joining us, hanging out with us. And guys, we'll be back tomorrow with probably the crossover. We'll see if David Locke still wants to do a crossover. We'll see if he's still up for it. See if he still has anything to say. See if he still
Jake, when do we listen to you on the ticket, bro?
We are on from noon to 3. It is 96.7 FM if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We also have an app called the Sports Day Talk app. We put all of our segments up in podcast form if you just search like Ticket Top 10. So
that's
yeah, that's a pretty easy way to do it. It's kids and their podcast, man. Who knew? Yeah, check us out if you're so inclined. And honestly, dude, I love you guys. The guy I do the show with, Dan, we both listen, probably 75% of your shows. So I'm super proud of you guys, and it's very cool to see what you guys have made out of this thing. It's very, very cool.
By the way, for those that don't know, I should have said this off top. Jake was the first host of this podcast. When I was I first like emailed David Locke when I was a definite nobody, and I was like, hey, I'll host Locked On Mavs. He's like, oh, I already got guys, and I was like, oh, who are these guys gonna be? And I was like, oh, it was Jake Kemp and Mike Marshall. It's like, oh, okay, fine. And then they were like,
we know these guys.
yeah, and they were like, well, now we don't want to do this, and so they quit it. And then David went back and found my email and was like, hey, you want to do this? And I was like, yes, please, I'll do anything. I'm just trying to break into this business, and here we are. What, like 5 years later?
Well, I appreciate that David gave us the opportunity to do that, but like it's not even in the same stratosphere. Like what you guys do is awesome, and I think it's a must listen for sure.
Well, dang, thank you. There you go. We'll be back tomorrow, guys. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.